In November 1960, Edith Piaf walked into a Paris recording studio and recorded a song that had been written for her by Charles Dumas and Michel Vauquer. The session lasted several hours. When it was finished, she dedicated the recording to the French Foreign Legion. France was at war in Algeria. The men of the Legion were in the desert. The song was called Non, je ne regrette rien. It would become the most recognized recording of her career. But the specific act of the dedication, the choice she made in that recording studio in November 1960 to give this particular song to those particular men, is the part of the story that has been least examined. And it is the part that explains something about the song that the song alone does not explain. To understand what the dedication meant, you have to understand what the French Foreign Legion was in 1960, and what the war in Algeria was, and what the song was saying to the men who received it in the desert. The French Foreign Legion in 1960 was an institution with a specific history and a specific relationship to France that was not shared by any other branch of the French military. It was composed of men who had come from everywhere, from France, from Germany, from Eastern Europe, from the displaced populations of the post-war world, and who had chosen, for reasons as varied as their origins, to serve under the French flag in conditions that other military institutions would not accept. In 1960, it was in Algeria. The Algerian War was, at that point, in its 6th year. France and the Algerian independence movement had been in conflict since 1954, and the war had become one of the most divisive episodes in modern French history, a war being fought by men who were instruments of a policy that France itself was beginning to doubt. The Legion was doing what the Legion was sent to do. The men in the desert were far from France, fighting a war that France was not certain it wanted to win. For Piaf, the song was personal in a way that the dedication amplified rather than created. By 1960, her life had accumulated losses and reversals, and choices that would have, in most lives, produced regret of a specific and grinding kind. She had loved people who had died. She had worked through physical conditions that should have ended her career. She had made choices, personal, professional, relational, that the world had judged and that she had continued to make despite the judgment. The song was, in some sense, a declaration about all of this, a statement of the specific kind of freedom that comes not from having made the right choices, but from having accepted the choices you made. She gave this to the Legion, to men who were, in their own way, in a condition that the song also described: committed, past the point of revision, going forward regardless. The recording itself, the technical fact of the performance on the day it was made in November 1960, is one of the most studied pieces of recorded music in the French Chanson tradition. The voice on the recording is the voice of a woman who had been through enough of her life to mean what she was saying without effort. The simplicity of the performance, the directness, the absence of ornamentation, the quality of someone delivering a statement rather than demonstrating a skill, is what makes it the recording it is. She is not performing the absence of regret, she is stating it. The adoption was not without its own history. It was not a march in the formal sense, not written for a military institution, not produced by the official culture of the Legion. It was a piece of music from the outside that had been recognized by the men on the inside as more accurately describing their condition than anything the inside had produced for itself. She walked into the studio. She sang that she had no regrets. She gave it to men who were living without the option of having them. Consider what it meant for the song to arrive in the camps in the form it arrived. It did not arrive as a message from the French government. It did not arrive as an official communication of support from the civilian world the men had left behind. It arrived as a piece of music made by a woman in a recording studio, addressed to them specifically, saying something that no official communication would have been authorized to say. That whatever they had done and whatever they were doing was not something they should regret. That the commitment they had made, the specific, irrevocable commitment of the Legion, was a commitment worth making, and that someone outside the institution recognized it as such. The men adopted it. The French Foreign Legion adopted Non, je ne regrette rien as the unofficial march of the institution. They sang it, they played it. They made it the thing they put on when they needed to remember why they were where they were. The adoption was not official in any bureaucratic sense. It was the kind of thing that happens when a large group of people simultaneously recognize that something fits, that a piece of music has captured something about their specific condition that they had not had language for before the music provided it. The Legion had had music before, had had its own traditions of march and ceremony, but Non, je ne regrette rien was something different from the institutional music that had preceded it. It was not written for the Legion. It was not a march in any formal sense. It was a pop song, recorded by a civilian woman for a civilian audience, that had been given to soldiers and that soldiers had chosen to take as their own. A choice that reversed the normal direction of cultural transmission. What the song captured, for those men, was something specific to the condition of people who had made irreversible choices and who were living inside the consequences of those choices without the possibility of revision. The Foreign Legion is, by design, an institution whose members have separated themselves from their previous lives in a specific and often definitive way. The Legion accepted people as they presented themselves and required in return a commitment that was total. Non, je ne regrette rien spoke to this condition in the direct language of total commitment. Not the sentimental version of acceptance, but the absolute version. I do not regret it, any of it. I would do it again. The French Foreign Legion still uses the song. Decades after the Algerian War ended, decades after the specific circumstances that made the dedication meaningful have passed into history, the song remains the thing the Legion plays when it needs to remember what commitment sounds like when it is expressed without qualification. At Legion parades, at ceremonies, at the moments when the institution publicly performs what it is, the music is Piaf's voice saying, "No regrets, none, not for anything." There is a particular quality to music that has been given to a specific group of people in a specific moment of difficulty. The giving changes the music, not its notes, not its arrangement, not the voice that recorded it, but its meaning in the world, which is the only meaning music actually has. A song that is given to men in a desert during a war carries that gift forward into every subsequent hearing of it. She recorded the song in a few hours in November 1960. She would live for less than 3 more years. But the thing she made in those hours has outlasted the war, outlasted the Legion's presence in Algeria, outlasted the political conditions that made the dedication meaningful in its original context, and outlasted the singer herself. She walked into the studio. She sang that she had no regrets. She gave it to men who were paying that cost in the Algerian desert and received by them as the only accurate statement of their condition that the civilian world had thought to send. The song played on. It plays still. No, she did not regret anything, Not a thing. And neither for 3 minutes and 8 seconds does anyone who hears it.